Today I'm going to be attempting to make some resin dice, and I'm going to be using Let's Resin's dice mold. This is actually my first video making resin dice, come to think of it. I've bought other dice molds but can never get them to come out looking decent, and it's made me completely avoid making resin dice. But Let's Resin recently released this mold, and I was like, okay, I'm going to give resin dice one more chance, so here we are. This mold does look slightly different from the ones I've had. It has these little silicone bits that hold the lid and base together, so I'm hoping that's a good start. I don't know, we'll see. The first thing I want to do before I mix up a batch of epoxy resin is I want to make a test dice or two. Is it dice or die? I don't know what the singular word for dice is, but I'm just going to call them dice, and if it's die, I'm sorry you guys, just hang in there with me. Anyways, I'm going to be using UV resin for it. UV resin is quick and easy, which means I'll have a dice within a few minutes, and it'll give me a good idea whether or not this mold will work or not. So I'm going to fill up the 6-sided dice here, and I'm not going to be concerned about air bubbles. This test is just to make sure the dice won't have any weird divots on the sides where we put in the resin. Now that the mold is filled up, I'm going to close it, and I need to line up these little silicone bits and push them into the opposite holes so that the top part of the mold sticks to the bottom part of the mold like so. Okay, so I can already see an air bubble forming on the top here, so let me just quickly open this back up to remove this big air bubble, and I'm going to be putting in a little bit more UV resin in, and there. Now I'm going to put the mold under my UV lamp, and I'm going to give it a minute on each side. Remember, when working with UV resin, to always cure both sides, and then if the resin feels hard enough, I'll remove the lid and give the dice one more minute under the lamp without the lid. Let me know down below if you've had good luck making resin dice. I've personally had bad luck when it comes to making resin dice. With other molds I've had in the past, the side where you put the resin in is always the side that screws up and always comes out with weird divots, and it's just too much work to fix. So I'm really hoping with this mold things will be different. Okay, so the dice feels and seems fully cured, so I'm going to just remove the overspill out of the way and it'll pop right out. By the way, the dice was under the lamp for 4 minutes total. I gave it an extra minute under the light without the lid just to make sure it was fully set. Okay, so far the dice looks good. I can see a few air bubbles in the dice itself, but on the side where I poured the resin into, I can't see anything, so that's a good sign. And all the pointed edges are pointy, and this looks really promising. I'm really happy with the results. There is a little excess of resin on the edge, but that will easily snap off. And as far as tests go, this one's gonna get an A+. And I think I'm feeling confident enough to go ahead and try with epoxy resin. Okay, so for this set of dice I'm going to be making with epoxy resin, I want to make one of each dice. I'm going to be using Let's Resin's Intense Chameleon powders. I'm thinking since there's 5 different pigments and 7 dice cavities, I can make 1 dice per pigment, and then for the last 2, I'll just use my favorite pigments for them. To dust these pigments onto the mold, I just used the brush that came with the set, and also I had a couple of my own. I initially started by having a paper towel over the dice cavities as I'm dusting the 6-sided one because, as we all know, these pigment powders can get pretty messy, but in the end, I decided not to use the paper towel. It just kept getting in the way, and since these pigments do clean up well with a baby wipe, I just put it aside. Now when it came to dusting the other dice cavities, it was really tricky. I actually didn't film myself dusting them, and that's why this part of the video I'm referring to what I'm doing in past tense. It was really hard to get the brush into the right angle and then also making sure that there is a good layer of pigment on the mold, so I just moved my phone out of the way and focused in on it. But here's the mold fully dusted, and now I just need to do the lid. This part I want to do in front of you guys because if you guys decide to do something similar to what I'm doing here and need to dust pigments onto the molds, and if those molds have lids, when it comes to the lid, you need to work from right to left. I have both the lid and mold lined up here, and as you guys can see, the little triangle cavity for the dice on the mold is on the left, but on the lid, the top side is on the right. The same with the big triangle side, the cavity is on the right, but on the lid, the top side is on the left. I hope I'm making sense, but I just wanted to point this out because it can be an easy mistake. I actually almost made this mistake, and it's kind of like stickers or tattoos when you put them in resin. You kind of have to visualize it first in a sense, because when you put the lid on the mold, it will be facing the other way. So I really hope I'm making sense, and if I'm not, I'm really sorry if I made you guys more confused. So one question I've gotten a few times on my videos that I'd like to answer for you guys, now's actually the perfect time, is when I use these pigment powders, how do I clean them up? As you guys can see, my gloves are super colorful. And the best way besides using baby wipes is to use 99% rubbing alcohol. I have some in a small spray bottle, and when I'm done crafting, I will spray my workspace down and sometimes my gloves with it, and then use a paper towel or baby wipe to wipe them off. With my molds dusted and my workspace super clean, it's time to mix up some resin. I'm going to be using deep pour resin for the dice to try and avoid as many air bubbles as possible. I'm mixing up 3 ounces of resin, but this is way too much for this mold. I'm probably only going to be using around 1 to 1.5 ounces of resin. With it starting to get colder in Canada, my room is getting colder and it's getting harder to mix up resin without getting many air bubbles. So I'm gonna just quickly run this resin through my resiner's vacuum chamber for 5 minutes and ta-da! So much better. Now I'm going to dye this resin black and I can go ahead and fill up my mold. I'm also thinking that I'll leave my mold a few minutes before putting the lid on. That way, if there's any bubbles in there, there's time for them to rise up to the top and then I can use my lighter to pop them. I'm really hoping these dice come out good and that this mold works because my husband and I play Yahtzee a lot and it'd be so cool to have a custom set of dice made from resin. At one point, I also was collecting dice, so just imagine how much more dice I could add to my collection. Let me know down below if you play any dice games. I know a lot of people play D&D and I'm pretty sure that's who this mold set is aimed for, but it would be cool if Let's Resin came out with a mold with multiple 6-sided dice only cavities. Most of the games my family plays only use 6-sided dice, so yeah. Let's Resin, if you're watching this, please consider making a 6-sided only dice mold. Okay, so now I'm going to close up my mold and make sure these silicone nubbies are fully in their little holes. And now all I can do is wait and keep my fingers crossed. Okay, so it's been 2 days and I can finally demold these dice. Let's see what we have. Okay, so we do have some air bubbles in here. Let me actually remove all the dice out of the mold and then we'll take a closer look. Okay guys, so at a closer inspection, I can see the mistakes I have here and they're actually my fault. And it's because I used those pigment powders. Since they're so opaque, I couldn't see that there were bubbles. Bubbles at the top like I did with the test dice I made at the beginning of this video. So what I'm going to do is I will be making another set of dice and fix the mistakes I did in this video and I'll report back to you guys. But overall, I'm really impressed with this mold, and even though I have a couple of dice here that don't look the greatest, I think this could be the mold for dice. But don't hold me to that. Like I said, I want to make another set and then I'll officially call it. I've definitely had way better results with this mold than any other dice mold I've tried in the past. So maybe I can find those old molds and do a comparison. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd be interested in seeing that. And also let me know if you've tried Let's Resin's dice mold and what were your results like. As always guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you've learned something. If you did, then please smash the like button. And if you want to see more resin crafting videos, then be sure to check out one of the videos that's popping on screen now. Thanks so much for watching.